We're waiting for someone authorized to sign the capital commitment, not the person delivering the documents.
Vanessa's voice cut across the boardroom. 11 executives watched Amos Davenport stand with his hand suspended above the table. No one defended him. Several lowered their eyes. Amos slowly lowered his hand, slid the untouched $180 million agreement back into his portfolio, and met Vanessa's eyes.
Then you've already answered the only question I came here to ask.
She smiled, certain she had put him in his place. Minutes later, Amos stepped into the elevator and made one quiet call. By 11:20, the withdrawal process had already begun. Vanessa had no idea what had just started. The first thing Amos Davenport noticed that morning was the wobble in the table. One uneven leg pressed against a folded square of cardboard, and whenever someone leaned on the edge, the coffee cups trembled. No one at the Bronzeville Enterprise Center complained. The table had held business plans, rejection letters, tax forms, and more second chances than anyone counted. Amos sat near the window with his jacket over the chair, listening as the room moved through numbers, supplier contracts, and the frustrations people carried when they had done everything right and were still told they were not ready. Most of the owners around him were black. Most knew the pause before a banker asked for one more document, one more guarantee, one more reason to believe them. Across the table, a younger man named Terrence Brooks kept smoothing the shoulders of a navy suit that was too large for him. He had a proposal meeting that afternoon with a regional distributor. His figures were sound, his samples were clean. His voice, when he finally spoke, was not. "Mr. Davenport, how do you walk into a room when you know they've already decided who you are?" The question quieted the table. Amos studied him, wanting Terrence to hear the answer without mistaking it for comfort. "Don't spend your whole life proving you deserve a chair," he said. "Learn to recognize which tables never deserved you." Terrence nodded, though the fear in his face remained. Amos did not expect it to vanish. Good advice rarely removed fear. It only gave fear somewhere to stand. At 10:25, Amos checked his watch, gathered his leather portfolio, and left through the center's narrow front door. 20 minutes later, he entered the polished heart of the Loop. CrownPoint Systems occupied 32 floors of a glass tower built to make every visitor look smaller on arrival. The lobby walls shone pale gray beneath recessed lighting. Security gates opened with soft electronic clicks. Receptionists greeted familiar executives before their shoes crossed the marble. Amos arrived 15 minutes early. His name sat at the top of the executive visitor list, though the woman behind the desk did not look at the screen first. She looked at his dark skin, plain charcoal suit, and the repaired edge of his portfolio. Then she pointed toward a side corridor. "Deliveries and vendors use the rear entrance, sir." Amos stayed where he was. "I have an 11 o'clock meeting with the executive team." Her smile tightened. "Company name?" "Davenport Meridian Capital." She typed it, stopped, and looked at him again. "Identification, please." Amos handed over his license. She scanned it, then asked him to wait while she called another receptionist. The second woman repeated his name, checked the screen, and whispered something too low to hear. Behind Amos, a white consultant in a golf shirt rolled a suitcase toward the desk. "Even Mercer, Harlan Advisory." The first receptionist brightened. "Of course, Mr. Mercer, they're expecting you. No identification, no second check." She handed him a black access badge and directed him toward the private elevator. Amos watched the doors close behind him. When the monitor refreshed, clean white letters appeared. "Amos Davenport, founder, Davenport Meridian Capital." The receptionist stared at the title, then at Amos. An apology would have required her to admit what had happened. Instead, she said, "The system sometimes lists titles more generously than they are in practice." Amos read the name on her badge. Dana Whitfield. "Thank you, Miss Whitfield." He accepted the visitor pass without another word. The executive elevator climbed in silence. 30 floors above, Miriam Lane arranged bottled water, legal pads, and silver pens around the boardroom table. Every place was complete except the chair reserved for Amos. A department manager had removed the water and folder, assuming the empty seat belonged to the person bringing the investment documents. When the elevator opened, Amos stepped into the corridor and heard a man near the conference room say, Looks like technical support got here early. He had heard assumptions dressed as certainty before, but this one waited for him at the door. Amos adjusted the portfolio beneath his arm. Then he walked toward the voice. The man who had mistaken Amos for technical support was Grant Keller, CrownPoint's vice president of operations. He did not apologize when Amos entered the boardroom. He checked the visitor badge as if the plastic might explain the mistake. 11 voting seats ringed the table, although Vanessa's chair at the head remained empty. Alicia Monroe, CrownPoint's procurement director, occupied a separate chair near the wall as a non-voting observer, close enough to answer questions but far enough to remember that the real decisions belonged to others. She was the only other black person in the room. When Amos met her eyes, she gave the smallest nod. Miriam restored the missing water and folder at Amos's place. Nora Ellis rose to greet him, but the door opened before she reached him. Vanessa Crowe entered with the energy of someone who expected every conversation to reorganize around her. She shook hands as she moved down the table. When she reached Evan Mercer, the consultant Amos had watched pass through the lobby without showing identification. She smiled and asked about his golf swing. Evan laughed. The room relaxed. Amos stood when Vanessa turned toward him. He extended his hand. Her gaze touched his face, dropped to the worn edge of his cuff, then settled on the leather portfolio beside his chair. Her hand remained flat on the meeting binder. "We're waiting for someone authorized to sign the capital commitment," she said, "not the person delivering the documents." Silence entered the room before anyone could hide from it. Amos kept his hand extended for one more second, long enough for everyone to understand that Vanessa had seen the gesture and chosen not to return it. Then he lowered it. "Amos Davenport," he said, "I make the final investment decision for Davenport Meridian Capital." Nora answered at once. "That's correct. Mr. Davenport is the fund's founder and managing partner." Miriam added his title was confirmed in the meeting brief and visitor file. Vanessa had room to stop. A simple apology would have changed the temperature. Instead, she looked at Miriam. "Verify it again. A fund that size usually doesn't send its founder alone." Amos sat down. Vanessa began the presentation as though the interruption belonged to him. When she addressed the board, her pace was quick. When she turned to Amos, she slowed each sentence and explained bridge financing and stage deployment in the careful tone used for someone new to the subject. Amos let her finish. He had designed the structure she was describing. 10 minutes later, he asked why CrownPoint's cash reserve assumed 2 state contracts would renew before written extensions had been issued. Vanessa's expression tightened. "There's no need to become defensive," she said. "We know our clients." Nora opened her mouth, but Grant cut across her. "The assumption is too soft. We should treat both renewals as unconfirmed." Vanessa nodded. "Exactly. That's the decisive thinking we need." Alicia's pen stopped moving. Amos noticed. Vanessa continued. "CrownPoint works with governors' offices, transit authorities, and public agencies. Our partners have to project the right stature when they enter those rooms." Amos folded his hands. "Is stature measured by financial performance?" he asked, "or by what you believe an investor should look like?" No one answered. Howard Keene shifted forward, his lips parted. Vanessa glanced toward him, and whatever he had intended to say disappeared. He looked down. Alicia saw it happen. Amos opened his portfolio and removed the capital commitment package. More than 100 pages with the final authorization tab marked in blue. He set it before him without opening it. The sound was soft, yet it traveled the table. "I came here to evaluate an investment," he said. "You've helped me complete the most important part." Vanessa leaned back. "Mr. Davenport, if this is some kind of test." Amos returned the package to his portfolio. "It wasn't," he said. "That's why the result matters." He stood, buttoned his jacket, and looked from Nora to Miriam, from Howard to Alicia, then across the remaining faces that had chosen silence because it felt safer than interruption. "I have enough information to make my decision." He lifted the portfolio and walked toward the door. No one tried to stop him until his hand was on the handle. Miriam caught the door before it closed behind Amos. "Mr. Davenport." He stopped near the elevator, one hand on his portfolio. The hallway had gone quiet, the way corporate hallways do after something public and ugly, when everyone suddenly finds a screen to study. Miriam reached him slightly out of breath. "I'm sorry," she said. "What happened in there was not acceptable." Amos looked at her. Her apology carried no performance, only the strain of someone who had watched a line crossed and knew silence had helped it happen. "You weren't the one who left my hand in the air," he said. "But you will decide whether the minutes record what happened or turn it into a convenient misunderstanding." The elevator arrived. Miriam lowered her eyes, then met his again. "I understand." Amos stepped inside. The doors closed. He called Calvin Reed before the elevator passed the 25th floor. Calvin answered on the second ring. "How did it go?" "Freeze the CrownPoint commitment," Amos said. No anger sharpened his voice. That made Calvin sit straighter. "All 180 million? All of it. Preserve every email, note, draft, and diligence file. Trigger the withdrawal clause inside the review window. No public statement." Calvin paused. "The co-investors are following our lead. If we pull, the rest may unravel faster than CrownPoint expects." Amos watched the floor numbers descend. "I know. Do you want me to give them a reason?" "Not yet." Amos shifted the portfolio beneath his arm. "We cannot place our clients' money in the hands of people who see status before they see a person." Calvin did not ask for details. 16 years beside Amos had taught him restraint was never indecision. "I'll start now." The call ended at the 14th floor. Amos opened another contact. Peter Lang answered with a cautious greeting. Harborline Technologies had spent months seeking growth capital, but Amos had never confused need with readiness. "Peter," he said, "I may reopen our review." Hope entered the silence, then steadied itself. "What do you need?" 48 hours. "Send me your supplier, scoring framework, employee reporting protections, and 2 years of complaint audits. Remove any category built around executive image, cultural fit, or customer comfort unless it is tied to documented conduct. Agree to an independent review." Peter exhaled. "That's a serious change. So is the money." Amos did not soften it. "I'm not asking for a promise, I'm asking for proof." Peter said he would have the material ready. Amos ended the call before the lobby. 30 floors above, Nora Ellis closed the boardroom door and faced Vanessa. The others had begun gathering papers, though no one had moved on. "He can withdraw," Nora said. "The contract gives Davenport Meridian until Friday." Vanessa remained at the head of the table. "Then call him. You should call him." Nora's voice stayed level, but effort showed at the corners of her mouth. "Not to bargain, to apologize." For one brief moment, Vanessa looked toward the empty chair across from her. It was the second chance the morning had offered. She turned away. "He'll come back," she said. "People like that do not get many chances to enter a room like this." Alicia stopped packing her notes. Howard Keene looked at Vanessa, then at the door Amos had used. No one corrected her. Miriam returned to her desk and opened the meeting minutes. The first draft read, "Mrs. Crowe declined. Mr. Davenport offered Handshake and questioned his authority after his identity had been confirmed." 10 minutes later, a tracked revision appeared under Vanessa's name, "Brief difference in greeting protocol." Miriam stared at it. The cursor blinked beside the sentence. She restored the original wording, saved a private copy to a protected folder, then left the edited version open without approving it. In the lobby, Amos returned his badge to Dana Whitfield. She avoided his eyes. The digital clock above security changed to 11:20 as his phone vibrated. Calvin's message read, "Withdrawal process initiated. Records preservation active." Amos stepped through the revolving door into the Chicago morning. Behind him, CrownPoint still possessed its tower, contracts, payroll, and a market value measured in billions. What no one upstairs understood yet was that the first thing they had lost was not money. It was time. For 2 days, CrownPoint's glass tower looked unchanged. Employees crossed the lobby with coffee in hand. Project dashboards remained green. Vanessa Crowe took the silence as surrender. On Wednesday afternoon, she sat beneath studio lights in a burgundy jacket and told a business anchor the capital round was nearing completion. She smiled at the right moments and spoke of confidence, expansion, and disciplined leadership. No one watching could see the unsigned commitment package locked inside Amos Davenport's portfolio across the city. Thursday morning, Nora Ellis received the notice at 8:12. She read the first paragraph standing beside her desk. By the second, she had sat down. Davenport Meridian Capital had exercised its contractual right to withdraw the full $180 million. The filing was final. 3 co-investment funds placed their commitments on immediate hold before 9. At 9:17, CrownPoint's commercial lender requested a new credit review. The company had not lost one check. It had lost the confidence attached to the name written across it. Nora printed the notice and walked into Vanessa's office without knocking. Vanessa was reviewing photographs from the television interview. Nora placed the paper over them. Vanessa read it once. Her thumb stayed against the bottom corner. Then she read it again, slower. "Call their legal team," she said. "There must be a violation." There isn't. Nora remained standing. They withdrew inside the review window. Every condition was followed. "Then find another lead investor." Nora drew a breath. "Without this round, we have 4 months of safe operating cash. Less if the state renewals slip. One major client leaves, and we start cutting projects and positions." Vanessa's eyes moved toward the window. Traffic passed far below, too small to carry consequence. Nora saw the fear arrive before pride covered it. "Call Amos," she said. "Not to ask for the money back. Apologize for what happened." Vanessa turned. "I will not apologize to a man using money to teach me how to run my company." "He didn't create the risk," Nora said. "He saw it." Vanessa's expression closed. "That will be all." Harborline had delivered its response on Wednesday morning before the 48-hour deadline. The package did not rely on slogans. It included a revised supplier scorecard, written protections for internal reporting, 2 years of complaint data, and a signed agreement allowing independent review. Categories such as executive presence and cultural fit had been removed unless tied to documented conduct. Amos read every page with Calvin beside him. "They accepted all 4 conditions," Calvin said. "Then structure the investment in stages." Amos replied, "Release the first portion after the independent reviewers are appointed. Tie the rest to compliance milestones." Calvin studied him. "You want no discretion. I want room for promises to become memory." By noon Thursday, after CrownPoint's withdrawal became final, Davenport Meridian approved a phased investment in Harborline. Amos issued no public accusation against CrownPoint. He did not need to. Markets paid attention to movement. By late afternoon, a municipal transit authority paused its CrownPoint pilot and invited Harborline into the review. 2 other clients requested proof that CrownPoint could finance its existing commitments. Vanessa spent the next day calling 9 replacement investors. 6 never returned the call. 1 assistant said the partner was unavailable indefinitely. 2 agreed to speak. Both asked the same question before discussing terms. Why did Davenport Meridian withdraw? Vanessa tried calling it a difference in strategy. The first investor asked why the difference had emerged after an executive meeting. She called it a personality conflict. The second asked whether the board had reviewed the incident. Every answer opened another question. By evening, she stopped calling. Nora entered with a new cash projection and laid it across the desk. A single line had been marked in red. "Loss of 1 additional major client will make the expansion plan unsustainable." Vanessa stared at the sentence. For the first time, the $180 million no longer looked like a number that had left. It looked like the first thing holding everything else together. Vanessa called the communications team into her office before 9 the next morning. 4 people arrived with laptops, legal pads, and the guarded expressions of employees who knew they had not been invited to offer opinions. Vanessa stood near the window while the city moved below her. "We need a clean account of the Davenport meeting," she said. "Nothing emotional, nothing that feeds speculation." The first draft appeared before lunch. It claimed Amos had failed to identify himself clearly, reacted strongly to a brief misunderstanding, and ended the discussion before CrownPoint could resolve it. The final paragraph described Davenport Meridian's withdrawal as a private investment decision unrelated to CrownPoint's conduct. The words were calm. That made them more dangerous. Miriam read the statement twice in Vanessa's office. "This isn't accurate," she said. Vanessa remained behind her desk. "Which part?" Mr. Davenport identified himself. Nora confirmed him. I confirmed him. You declined his handshake after both confirmations. Vanessa's face did not change, but the room cooled. You're treating a few awkward seconds as if they define an entire meeting. They changed the meeting. Miriam heard the strain in her own voice and steadied it. Vanessa closed the folder between them. We are entering a difficult restructuring period. Decisions will have to be made. People who remain loyal to this company will be remembered. It was not phrased as a threat. It did not need to be. Miriam returned to her desk and placed 3 pens in a straight line. One rolled slightly away. She put it back, then opened the original notes from the meeting. The sentence remained where she had left it. Miss Crowe declined Mr. Davenport's offered handshake after his authority had been confirmed. Her fingers rested above the keyboard, but she did not send the file. Not yet. Across the building, Howard Keene received the revised minutes. He read brief difference in greeting protocol and saw Amos's hand suspended over the table. He remembered leaning forward, ready to speak, then lowering his eyes when Vanessa looked at him. For years, Howard had called his silence restraint. Now he began to see it as permission. After most employees left, Alicia Monroe knocked on Nora's door, carrying a thick folder whose edges had softened from years of handling. I need to show you something, she said. The documents were not organized as an accusation. They were individual supplier reviews, scoring sheets, and internal comments collected over 3 years. Alicia opened the first file. A black-owned engineering firm had offered a lower bid and stronger delivery record, yet lost points for being an uncertain fit for senior clients. In the next file, a black woman who requested equal payment terms was labeled rigid and confrontational. Alicia placed 2 more evaluations side by side. A white owner who arrived in jeans had been described as practical, authentic, and easy to work with. A black owner dressed almost the same way had been marked down for lacking executive presence. Nora stared at the phrases. None sounded openly hostile. Each could pass through a meeting without forcing anyone to object. Who approved these? She asked. Different people, Alicia said. Same language. She turned several pages, revealing the pattern again and again. These words look neutral when you read them alone. Put them next to each other, and they tell the same story. Nora leaned back. What happened to Amos was not an isolated failure. CrownPoint had taught prejudice to wear professional clothes. That evening, Miriam remained at her desk after the executive floor emptied. The city lights reflected in the dark glass beside her. She opened a new email addressed to Judith Hale, chair of the audit committee. She attached the original meeting notes, the tracked revisions, and Vanessa's request for confirmation. The message body contained only one sentence. These records do not match the account the company is preparing to release. Miriam read it once. Her cursor hovered over send. For the first time that week, the choice in front of her was not between comfort and conflict. It was between the story Vanessa wanted remembered and the truth everyone else had helped bury. Miriam pressed send at 7:43 that evening. Nothing dramatic happened. No alarm sounded. The executive floor stayed silent, and the small blue confirmation at the bottom of her screen looked almost ordinary. Yet, she sat there for another minute, listening to the air system move through the empty offices, aware that the truth had finally left the safety of her private folder. The next morning, Midwest Business Ledger published a short report linking CrownPoint's collapsed capital round to an executive meeting with Davenport Meridian. The article offered no accusation, only timing. The meeting had taken place Monday. The fund had begun withdrawing shortly afterward. Reporters contacted Amos's office before sunrise. Davenport Meridian released one sentence. We invest in competence, accountability, and how partners treat people when they believe no one is watching. Vanessa's name did not appear. CrownPoint was not directly accused of anything. The absence of detail made the statement harder to contain. By noon, reporters were calling former employees, suppliers, and board members, asking what Amos might have seen. Judith Hale received Miriam's email before breakfast. Within the next hour, Nora sent her a confidential cash risk summary, and Alicia delivered scanned copies of the supplier evaluations she had shown Nora. Judith printed none of it. She read each document on a secured tablet, then called a closed meeting in a conference room 2 floors below Vanessa's office. Howard Keene arrived first. He sat with both hands folded over a yellow legal pad he never opened. Judith entered with Nora, Alicia, and outside counsel. Miriam joined by video from another room. No assistants, no recorded corporate minutes, only a protected interview file. Judith began with Howard. "Tell me what happened when Mr. Davenport entered the room." Howard described the confusion over his identity, Vanessa's tone, and the argument about investor stature. He called the meeting uncomfortable. Judith let the word remain between them. "Did you see Miss Crowe refuse Mr. Davenport's hand?" Howard looked at the legal pad. "Yes. Did you hear her call him the person delivering the documents?" "Yes. Did you know his identity had already been confirmed?" Howard's answer came more quietly. "Yes." Judith leaned back. "What did you do?" Howard's mouth opened, but no sentence followed. He remembered the exact second he had shifted forward. He remembered deciding that speaking might embarrass Vanessa, complicate the meeting, damage the deal. He had called that decision restraint. Sitting before Judith, he understood it had been permission. "Nothing," he said. The word cost him more than he expected. Judith did not shame him. She did not need to. "Silence is still part of the record," she said. By early afternoon, the audit committee issued a preservation order covering emails, visitor logs, meeting drafts, supplier reviews, personnel files, and internal messages. No document connected to the Davenport meeting or Alicia's procurement concerns could be edited or deleted. Alicia and Miriam were placed under formal anti-retaliation protection. Any employment action involving either woman now required audit committee approval. Judith called Vanessa personally. "This is still repairable," she said. "Acknowledge what happened. Cooperate with the review. Stop treating correction as defeat." Vanessa stood beside her office window, watching television crews gather near the curb below. "The board is overreacting to one investor's sensitivity," she replied. "He chose to personalize a business discussion. The records do not support that version. Then the records lack context." Judith waited, giving her one final opening. Vanessa filled it with certainty. "I will not let this company be governed by wounded feelings." The call ended. Less than 20 minutes later, Vanessa contacted Human Resources and requested a negative leadership review for Alicia Monroe. She described Alicia as disloyal, disruptive, and no longer aligned with executive culture. The HR director listened, took notes, and forwarded the request to Judith under the new protection order. Vanessa was still drafting supporting language when a notification appeared across her screen. "Access restriction active. Personal recru modification privileges suspended pending audit review." She read it twice. Then she tried opening Alicia's file. The system denied her. For the first time since Amos had walked out, Vanessa discovered that authority could close a door from the other side. The live interview began at 8:05 on a Monday morning, with Vanessa Crowe seated beneath clean studio lights and the CrownPoint logo glowing on a screen behind her. She wore a pale gray jacket chosen to suggest calm rather than defense. The anchor opened with market questions, then moved to the meeting with Amos Davenport. Vanessa said CrownPoint had always valued equality, opportunity, and professional respect. She described the incident as a misunderstanding made worse when Amos left before the company could address it. The anchor watched her for a beat. "Did you refuse to shake his hand?" Vanessa's expression held. "Body language can be interpreted in different ways," she said. "I won't reduce a complex business discussion to one gesture." The clip spread before the interview ended. It was not what she said that caught people. It was what she would not say. By noon, former employees began contacting reporters. None described a single explosive moment. They described patterns. A black regional manager had been removed from a client presentation after Vanessa said her natural hairstyle did not reflect the company's executive image. A white director who challenged leadership in meetings was praised for courage. A black director who spoke with the same firmness was described in a performance review as difficult to control. A black supplier had been required to produce financial guarantees 3 times, while a white competitor received a waiver based on personal reputation. Each story sounded small enough to dismiss alone. Together, they formed a shape no statement could flatten. CrownPoint's stock fell again. Within 3 weeks of Amos's visit, the company's market value hovered near $4.4 billion. 2 vice presidents resigned. A transportation client that had worked with CrownPoint for nearly a decade chose not to renew. Every morning, Miriam still carried Vanessa's briefing binder into the office. The binders grew thinner. Meetings disappeared from the calendar. Calls once marked urgent became postponed, then canceled. One afternoon, Vanessa stepped into the hallway and heard laughter near the copy room. The sound stopped when employees saw her. People who once smiled at her sharp remarks now studied their phones or turned toward closed office doors. Fear had not become respect. It had simply stopped pretending. Vanessa returned to her office and called Human Resources. "Terminate Alicia Monroe," she said. The HR director reminded her that Alicia was protected under the audit order. Vanessa's voice hardened. "Then document insubordination and proceed." The request reached Judith within minutes. She blocked it, added attempted retaliation to the investigation, and notified the board that Vanessa had ignored a direct preservation order. That evening, the executive floor emptied early. Vanessa remained. Near 9, she entered the boardroom alone. The ceiling lights were still on, casting a hard shine across the black table. Amos's chair stood where it had been 3 weeks earlier. Nothing about it looked important. That was what unsettled her. She sat at the head of the table and placed her hand flat on the surface, almost in the exact spot where it had rested while his remained unanswered. She tried to remember the clothes that had seemed so important that morning, but only Amos's face returned. The look he gave her after lowering his hand, as if he had learned something final about her. Vanessa withdrew her hand. For years, Vanessa had believed certainty gave her control of a room. Now every empty chair felt like a witness. Her laptop chimed from the far end of the room. She opened it and found an encrypted notice from the board secretary. Emergency session. Thursday 2 p.m. location, executive boardroom. The agenda contained one line: review of Vanessa Crowe's continued fitness to serve as chief executive officer. She read it once, then again. Outside the glass walls, Chicago remained bright and indifferent. Inside, the room she had once controlled no longer felt like hers. The emergency session opened less than 3 weeks after Amos Davenport walked out of CrownPoint. Vanessa arrived early in the burgundy jacket she had worn when she declared the Capitol round nearly complete. The color had once made her look controlled. Under the boardroom lights, it looked like evidence. No one stood when she entered. Howard Keene sat with both hands visible on the table. Nora Ellis had a closed folder before her. Alicia Monroe was not a voting member, but Judith Hale had invited her as a protected witness. The chair across from Vanessa remained empty until a video screen came alive. Judith began without ceremony. Vanessa spoke first. For 9 minutes, she described the company she had built, the contracts signed under her leadership, the jobs created, and the market value CrownPoint had once reached. Her voice stayed steady until she said she had not known Amos was the founder of Davenport Meridian Capital. Judith looked at her over the rim of her glasses. If he had not been the founder, would the way you treated him have been acceptable? Vanessa adjusted her sleeve. That is not what I said. It is the question I asked. Vanessa spoke about incomplete information, meeting pressure, and protecting the company from uncertainty. She never answered. Judith turned to the evidence. The first document was Miriam's email, sent before the meeting, identifying Amos as founder, managing partner, and final authority on the $180 million commitment. The second was the visitor record showing his title had been confirmed in the lobby. The third displayed the original meeting minutes beside Vanessa's revisions. Declined offered handshake became brief difference in greeting protocol. Questioned authority after confirmation became role clarification. One version described what happened. The other tried to make it disappear. Alicia's supplier files followed. The board saw the same behavior judged differently depending on who displayed it. Direct became difficult. Informal became unprofessional. Firm became confrontational. Judith did not give the pattern a dramatic label. She let repetition speak. Then came Vanessa's request to create a negative review for Alicia after the preservation order. followed by the attempted termination. Finally, Nora presented the financial timeline. Vanessa had continued presenting the funding round as nearly complete even after Nora warned her that Davenport Meridian could legally withdraw and that the co-investors were likely to follow. "You were not protecting confidence," Nora said. "You were withholding risk from the board." Vanessa looked around for the silence that had once protected her. It was gone. The screen changed, and Amos appeared from a plain conference room. Vanessa straightened. "Mr. Davenport," she said, using the title for the first time. Amos acknowledged her with a small nod. Judith asked what remedy he wanted. "None for me," Amos said. "I am not requesting compensation, and I am not asking you to remove anyone." Vanessa looked toward him, surprised. Amos continued. "I do not want a system that simply learns to recognize wealthy people faster. I want it to stop requiring people to be wealthy before it offers them respect." No one interrupted. "My right to basic courtesy did not begin when you discovered the size of my fund." Howard asked to speak. His voice carried less certainty than before, but more honesty. "I saw what happened," he said. "I thought silence would keep the room stable. It did the opposite. It told the person doing wrong that the room stood with her." He turned toward Amos. "I am sorry." Amos did not rescue him from the discomfort. He accepted the statement with a nod. Then the questions came. One director asked why Vanessa had ignored Nora's advice to apologize. Another asked why she altered the minutes. A third asked why she tried to punish Alicia. Vanessa answered each question, but the answers no longer controlled the room. For the first time in 9 years, the board listened without bending toward her version. No one looked down. When the questions ended, Judith closed the file. "Miss Crowe, please wait outside while the board votes." Vanessa stood. Her chair moved back with a soft scrape. She crossed the same room where Amos's hand had once hung unanswered and stepped into the corridor. The door closed behind her. A second later, the electronic lock engaged with a quiet click. Vanessa turned toward it. The sound was small, but it carried the weight of a room that no longer belonged to her. The vote took 19 minutes. Vanessa waited outside the boardroom with her arms folded, listening to the muted rise and fall of voices through the glass. When Judith opened the door, no one behind her looked relieved. 8-3, she said. "The board has voted to remove you as chief executive, effective immediately." Judith read the findings without drama. Serious failure of governance, alteration of internal records, retaliation against protected witnesses, and concealment of financial risk from the board. Vanessa heard each phrase as if it belonged to someone else's file. She had spent years turning language into control. Now language had become the instrument that removed it. "You have 20 minutes to collect personal items," Judith said. "Company property remains." Vanessa looked past her toward the table. Amos's image was gone from the screen. The empty chair remained. She walked back to her office without speaking. Miriam was already there with a plain cardboard box resting on the desk. No security officers stood inside. No one watched from the doorway. The quiet felt more exact than humiliation. Vanessa removed a framed photograph from a technology conference, then 2 personal journals that outside counsel had already cleared. A small award from a regional business council followed. She placed her leather calendar on top, then opened the upper drawer and found the pen she had used to sign CrownPoint's first major state contract. For a moment, she held it between her fingers. She remembered the applause that day, the room rising when she entered, the confidence that had once felt earned rather than expected. She set the pen inside the box. It was not even half full. The office had been designed to suggest permanence. Custom shelves, dark wood photographs arranged to imply a long future. But almost everything belonged to CrownPoint. The desk, the art, the name on the glass, even the view. Miriam stood near the door. Vanessa closed the box and looked at her. "You sent the records." It was not a question. Miriam met her eyes. "I sent what happened." Vanessa's mouth tightened, then relaxed. There was nothing left to threaten and no version left to revise. She lifted the box. Miriam did not follow. Weeks earlier, she had hurried after Amos because the company owed him an apology. Now she remained beside the desk while Vanessa walked alone toward the elevator. Inside, the mirrored wall returned a figure Vanessa barely recognized. Burgundy jacket, controlled posture, cardboard box held too carefully against her body. She had always believed employees respected decisiveness. Looking at her reflection, she understood how often what she called respect had been fear trained to stand still. The elevator descended. In the lobby, she passed the side corridor where Dana Whitfield had directed Amos toward the delivery entrance. Dana saw Vanessa and rose halfway from her chair, uncertain whether the old rules still required it. Vanessa kept walking. Reporters waited outside the revolving doors. Questions struck the glass before she reached them. She gave no statement. For 1 second, the revolving door reflected her against the tower she had once believed proved her importance. Then the glass turned, and the building disappeared behind her. She crossed the sidewalk, entered a waiting car, and placed the box beside her. Amos issued no victory statement and made no public appearance. That afternoon, the board named Nora Ellis interim chief executive. Her first announcement was not about image repair. It was about cash preservation, an independent review, and protecting jobs while CrownPoint reduced its expansion plan and renegotiated debt. The company would lose projects and status, but it would not be deliberately pushed into collapse. Amos had made his position clear through Calvin. Accountability did not require thousands of employees to pay for the choices of a few leaders. That night, Vanessa sat alone at her dining table. She opened one of the personal journals from the box and turned to a blank page. For several minutes, the pen from CrownPoint's first contract rested motionless in her hand. Then she wrote one sentence: "I read the clothes before I read the person." 6 months after Vanessa Crowe left CrownPoint, the company still carried the cost of what had happened. Its expansion plan was smaller. Several contracts were gone. The executive floor felt quieter, not because people were afraid to speak, but because the company had stopped treating volume as proof of leadership. Nora Ellis remained interim CEO, and Alicia Monroe now chaired every supplier review involving high-value contracts. On a warm Tuesday morning, Derek Mills entered the same building Amos Davenport had once been directed away from. Derek owned a small equipment company on the south side. His suit pulled at the shoulders, and his first answer came too slowly because he was trying not to let the room hear his nerves. 3 evaluators sat across from him. One wrote notes while Derek explained delivery capacity, safety records, and the way his company had reduced equipment failures for 2 local utilities. When Derek left, the panel began scoring. A senior reviewer typed, "Limited fit for senior client environments." Alicia looked at the screen. "What behavior supports that?" The reviewer paused. He seemed uncertain. "Where?" "His presentation style." Alicia waited. "Did he miss a number?" "No." "Did he fail to answer a technical question?" "No." "Was the proposal incomplete?" The reviewer looked back at the scorecard. "No." Alicia reached over, deleted the sentence, and rotated the screen toward the panel. "Then we score the bid we received, not the person we imagined." They reviewed cost, capacity, delivery time, safety history, and contract performance. Derek's company ranked first. He won a limited pilot, not as compensation, not as a symbol, but because once vague judgment was removed, his proposal was the strongest one in the room. Across the city, Amos had built something larger from the same lesson. The Open Table Initiative began with $90 million and a simple rule. Every rejection had to be explainable in language the applicant could challenge. The program offered capital, contract coaching, financial training, and access to procurement networks for business owners who had spent years being told they lacked the right connections, polish, or presence. Amos refused to let it become charity dressed as investment. Applicants still had to meet standards. The difference was that the standards could now be seen. Harborline received its second funding release only after independent reviewers confirmed its supplier reforms were operating as promised. Peter Lang had once assumed Amos' support was permanent. Amos corrected him in their first quarterly meeting. "Approval is not immunity," he said. "A company proves its values every time no one important is in the room." Nearly a year after the CrownPoint meeting, Amos, Miriam, and Alicia each received a separate letter from Vanessa on the same afternoon. Her letter did not ask for a position, a public statement, or forgiveness. She wrote that she had once believed she could read people quickly. What she had actually read were signals of status, tailoring, confidence, familiarity, the ease of someone who already expected to belong. Amos answered with one sentence. Change is not measured by how you treat people who can shape your career. It is measured by how you treat those who can offer you nothing. He sent the letter and returned to work. That evening, the Bronzeville Enterprise Center was hosting another small business session around the same uneven wooden table. Terrence Brooks, the young man from the opening morning, now sat near the window with a signed distribution contract in his folder. The door opened, and another man stepped inside wearing a suit too broad in the shoulders. He stopped just beyond the threshold, unsure which chair was meant for him. Before anyone else could speak, Amos stood. He crossed the room and offered his hand. Amos Davenport, he said, welcome to the table. The man took it. No one asked for his revenue, his title, or the name of anyone willing to vouch for him. The handshake came first. If this story made you think, support the channel with a like and subscribe. Which moment stayed with you most? And where are you watching from?